Quickness. What's the deal? I mean, you could come in on the Zoom portrait.
Yeah. Thank you all. I'm commencing the meeting of the November 16th meeting of the Norwalk Charter Revision Commission. And let's see on our quorum here, if people just check in. We have Carl
Dickens.
Anita Watford Raleigh. Angela
Wasuna.
and Tyler.
Tyler Fairbairn.
Okay, Patsy Brescia. And council. Steve Mednick and Mayor Rilling.
Recording in progress.
And Tom Livingston, chairman of our president of the city council. Approval of the minutes of
Okay. I gotta be right. Here you go. Okay. And there's no picture here either. Ah. Thanks.
the next order of business is the approval of the minutes of November 2nd. A commission's member, please move the minutes.
I make a motion that we approve the minutes of the prior meeting.
Okay. That's Tyler.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Are there any corrections or additions or changes to the minutes as presented?
Thank you.
Okay, hearing none and seeing no hands raised, all those in favor of the minutes as presented? Say aye or raise your
Aye.
hand. Anyone opposed? No, no one is in opposition. The minutes passed unanimously. We have the honor of having our honorable mayor with us this evening to get us kick-started. Sure.
Well, thank you, Ms. Brescia. Yeah, I wanted to stop by and thank everybody for being willing to serve on this very, very important commission. Our charter has been written over the years, and it's very convoluted, very challenging to understand and to read. And this is such an important process to help us get it back on track. And I know we have Steve Mednick on board, who did a remarkable job in organizing the charter in like areas so that we can understand it a little bit easier. But, Patsy, thank you for your willingness to be the chairperson, Carl, Benita, and all the others, Angela, Tyler, Rick, and I believe there's one more that Carl. Thank you so much. It's very challenging, but I think it's also critical, that we encourage the public to get involved for a couple of reasons. Number one, understanding the charter is such an important part of being a resident of Norwalk, understanding how we operate, how we're guided, how we're governed, and reading it and understanding it and participating in the charter review process, charter revision process, is critically important. So thank you for having these public hearings. I hope the public gets engaged, and I'm looking forward. This is something that shouldn't be one commission. This is something that should be ongoing, because our charter is so very challenging, so very convoluted, that it needs a complete reworking. It needs to be reduced where reduction can happen. It needs to be more clarity where more clarity needs to happen. So I'm excited about this. And again, I can't say it enough, but thank you all for being a part of it.
You're welcome. But as you do read through it over and over again, and each time you read it, you just keep saying, it's more confusing than ever. Instead of getting enlightened, you get challenged. Tom Livingston, would you like to make any additions to comments that you haven't had a chance to before?
No, thank you. I think I've said all I need to say right now. I'm just really here to watch and help where I can.
Okay, great. Okay. Is Steve is the Corporation Council going to be tuning in, or is that being postponed? We have them on the agenda.
I do not see him here. I wrote him a note the other day to remind him.
Okay,
If he's not here, I'm prepared to go on to the next item.
okay, all right, let's do that. And that is the schedule, proposed schedule of our workload.
Yeah,
Okay,
I sent out to Jordan, and I don't know if he sent out,
I think he did.
good. Because the initial schedule that went out was not the one that I sent to you earlier, Madam Chair. What I've tried to do is put together a pretty aggressive schedule, because if we're going to achieve the mayor's objectives of looking at this document, trying to simplify it, clarify it, we really are going to need to move on a pretty aggressive schedule to move our way through the charter. And so my proposal is that we, at our next meeting, begin the process of our due diligence, the substantive work that needs to be done. And I thought, and I've said this before to you, that I think that a real good test case would be to look at budget and finance issues. And let's see if we can create a model in the revision of that section that clarifies, that simplifies, that basically keeps the same structure. I think one of the points that I know that President Livingston has made and his colleagues have made is that we really want to make sure that we keep our eyes on the prize, and that the objective is to come up with a readable, workable document for the people of the city. And so my hope would be, and I'll be talking to Leisha tomorrow in the mayor's office, to try to set up a meeting with the appropriate budget officials to appear before this commission at the next meeting. Hopefully somebody from the Board of Estimate, and presumably somebody from the council, perhaps the chair of the Committee of Jurisdiction, or whoever else. Maybe the president has some thoughts on who might appear from the council to talk about the process and how we ultimately, what is the process? How does the process work? And then the real question would be, where do we go from there? The following meeting, and we'll talk about the 21st of December. I know when I put this together, I realize it complies with our first and third Wednesday meetings, but it also is very shortly before Christmas. So I get the fact that December 21st may be problematic. So let's not talk about the date. Let's talk about the content. What I was hoping to have for you on that date is a broad discussion, and I'll try to generate it with background documents, and we'll have to decide whether we want to have anybody else come in and talk. But I was hoping to be able to at least do a sketch, if not a draft, of the first three articles of the charter as they may look. And that's going to be a big lift, heavy lift for me to get done by that time. And that is to take a look at the construction. Now, we're not going to have all the definitions in, because you can't create the definitions until you know what's in the body of the document. But, broad standards, moving your code of ethics into the Article 1, into the front of the charter, that establishes standards of conduct. They already exist, but the objective would be to bring them into right at the beginning of the charter. So when the members of the public look at it, they see these are the standards that apply to our officials. Rules of order, how do those work? Civility, open meeting standards, public record standards, and the notion of diversity on boards and commissions. So those kinds of things would be addressed, and I'll show you different alternatives that are done in different communities. But the idea is I'm trying to be aggressive and show you that we need to tackle some of these sections, which I think will be less controversial. But from a drafting point of view, we need to look at those. Article 2, there shouldn't be a lot of changes. They're basically your territory. The chair asked me what that means, and the territory means your city, in effect, of how it's defined, general grant of powers. There won't be a lot of changes there. Article 3 will address issues that will need a little more thought. And certainly I want to talk to Mario about this. Council districts, we will probably be discussing reapportionment I don't think there's any intent to change the structure of the council. So that should be an easy draft unless people have other thoughts and there's a public clamor to make other changes. It just seems to me that we should be able to make those changes without difficulty. Make it clear that the state statutes apply to the election of public officials in Norwalk. The elector requirement to be an elector in order to serve in local office. Date of election, we're not going to change the date of election. Eligibility, vacancies, what happens when there's a temporary disability in the office of mayor. Those are the kinds of things that are addressed in that section. And so my intent at that meeting, whether it's the 21st or we kick it over to the first week in January, or I won't recommend it. Normally I would say, can we do another meeting in December? But I think it'll be very difficult for me to get all that drafting done any earlier than the 21st. So if we kick it off, the idea would be to be able to show you what the structure, the first 3 articles of the charter will begin to look like. I'm not saying they're going to be final actions. I don't write your charter. Well, I scriv it for you, but ultimately you're going to have to make the decisions on the document. But I just wanted to show you that those are the kinds of things that would go into that section. At the first meeting in January, maybe the second meeting, I'll leave that up to you. It would be a follow-up to our meeting with the finance people. Now, you may decide the stuff I just talked about should be dealt with after this meeting for a second, because this is the follow-up to the local finance people. We would do a comparative analysis of how finance sections look in other charters. I've been preparing a background document on comparative budget processes in the larger cities. And the idea here would be, and I'll talk to the chair, I don't, I make recommendations, but I'll talk to the chair about who should be on the panel and how best to facilitate the panel. But the idea is to get people from other communities to take a look at what we've got and opine on it in terms of how it works, does it make sense, and just move forward there. I also would be consulting with your bond counsel to see if there are any provisions of the charter that inhibit the ability to market your bonds in the 21st century. One of my towns had one of my cities had a provision where you actually had to act on it at 12 o'clock on a Friday afternoon in the mayor's office. So the whole council had to come into the mayor's office and the mayor had to sign all the documents, and that's the only way you could sell bonds. The world has moved on from that. And so I'd want to make sure that we don't have any impediments. And so I would ask bond counsel to opine and give us a sense of direction. Those are not complicated provisions, but I'd want to make sure that the people who are representing you in the markets have a feel for that. And I think at the end of that meeting, I think we would have a discussion. We'd have enough data, I would hope, to take a look at, Steve, we want you to keep exactly what we've got and just come back with language for us. Or Steve, we like what we've got, but we want to make this change or that change or whatever the change is. And at the following meeting, I would make a presentation with some draft revisions 2 weeks later. I also propose, although not yet invited, I always ask Joe DeLong, the mayor knows Joe, Joe DeLong, was a good friend of mine and really an outstanding director of CCM. Joe has really good thoughts about how cities should look and how cities should operate. And he gives a pretty good 20-minute, half-hour talk that's kind of more of a pep talk than anything else. But I think it'd be entertaining and I think it would be very useful for the commission to have somebody like that. So if you give me permission tonight, I will call Joe and see if he's available on the 18th of January for that meeting. Again, we might be moving everything over 2 weeks, so I get that as well. At the end of that meeting, you might open it up, Madam Chair. We'll talk about this for public comment on, I hopefully would have some draft language on Articles 1 through 3 and and 10, which is the board of, which would be the finance issues. The objective would be to have those there, not for final action, but for at least some preliminary public review of those sections. And I'll leave it up to you and the commission to decide how many public comment sessions you want to have. But I think it's useful to do them periodically so that we get a sense of any disdain, anger, opposition, or outright, adulation for the work that you're doing. I think that it's important through the process to try to do that based on my experience. And then, so on and so forth. I'll go through the whole thing if you want, but then I would, in February, we'd start to tackle on the these other positions, the elected offices of the mayor, council, board of ed, other elected officials, and we could look at comparative data as we get there. And then hopefully at that meeting, we would be able to act on the budget issues and maybe have a further discussion on Articles 1 through 3. And then from there on, we'd move on to the boards and commissions. And as you can see, and this will be changing, I think in my note to the chair, I said, this is very aggressive and it will change because we're not gonna, I hope we can keep up with everything we try to do, but we probably won't. And that's why we have a lot of open dates near the end of the process to try to accommodate that. So, so we would go through most of those sections. I am recommending, and Norwalk is in a really good place to do it, but I'll certainly want to talk to council leadership and the mayor to make sure everybody's on board. And then I'll obviously then make recommendations to the commission that when we get to the boards and commission section and we get to the department section, that we really establish what I think would be an ideal provision that basically mandates services, tells you how to create a department, tells you how to create a board or commission, but then basically only has in the charter those that are deemed to be essential to be in the charter. And what I mean by that is, and I can't tell you what they are in Norwalk, that's really going to be a judgment call. We'll see what's in the charter now. Do you need to keep this commission as it is structured and built in the charter, or do you simply want to mandate the creation of such a commission, but then do it by ordinance so that you can change the composition if you need to change the composition. You could change the purposes if you want to change the purposes. You could create your departments by budget and by ordinance, as opposed to creating departments in the charter. One department I know that's in your charter that really shouldn't be in the charter any longer is a welfare department. We haven't had welfare on a local level since maybe the mayor could help me or Tom, since the 1980s, I think, or early 1990s. I think it went away when I was still an elected official, when I was a little boy. And so it's so I think those sections will be really robust in terms of structure, how you create structure, but there won't be as much language as you see in some other charters, where right now in Stanford, I'm doing some work in Stanford, and they want to create 6 new commissions in their charter. And I've said to them, why? Why do you need to create them in your charter? Give you an example. I think a civil service commission or a personnel commission is the kind of commission that should be in your charter. You don't want to give the elected officials the ability to eliminate civil service if you have civil service in the community. I think an ethics commission should be laid out in a charter because you don't want to give elected officials the ability to get rid of an ethics commission. Or in Waterbury, they have an audit commission, which was a really critical commission. And we created that commission in the Waterbury charter to make sure that Waterbury would never go back to the fiscal madness that existed before the state came in, and Mayor Jarjura and his current and Mayor O'Leary as he replaced Jarjura have kept Waterbury on the straight and narrow, but they still have that audit commission, and no mayor can get rid of it, and you can't reduce the funding of it. So there are some commissions you may feel are essential and should be there, and some departments that are essential. You know, you may want to have the operational departments to make sure there's a department that deals with procurement. Public Works may be something you want to keep in a structured way. With procurement, you may want to establish constitutional standards, but you don't want to get in there and start defining what the qualifications of a procurement officer should be. You want to have a standard that's a best practice standard so that the mayor, working with a human resources director, can establish the best practices standard that may be subject to all to council approval or not. I don't know what the protocols have been in the past, but they are created because the charter says you need to have best practice standards. So I think, you know, we will look at it. We will take a look at the sections together, but I think we'll pare those sections down considerably. So that's kind of the issues. It takes us through, let's say the middle of March, maybe the end of March. And then we'll figure out where we are. We'll see how far behind we fall. And hopefully, you know, if we have to double up meetings, we'll double up meetings, but I think this can be done. So I wanted to show you in the short period of time we have, how hard we're going to have to work. That's all I'm trying to point out to everybody.
Right.
Madam Chair, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I'm sure.
No,
Fair.
that's what I said. I know this is a very daunting and challenging job, and it's critically important that we have the right people. And I think we've done a good job with selecting the right people.
Okay. Anybody else have a question?
Yeah, I have a question, Steve. You mentioned when we first got together, you
Will
mentioned
you identify
Oh,
yourself?
Carl
for the
Dickens,
record, please?
for the record, whichever record.
Minutes.
You had mentioned early on when we got together, and a couple times you mentioned that there's certain things in the charter that would be better handled by ordinance than in the charter. I don't want to put any more work on you, but would it be possible to just get, in your mind, a listing of what those items are in the charter that should be moved from charter to ordinance?
Well, very simply, I thought I stated it without going through every item in the charter. I think if you have a delineation of departments,
Okay,
I think that those departments should be moved to the code of ordinances unless, and I said this before as well, that unless you feel that they have to be stated. If you want to have a police department, you want to state there shall be a police department. If you want to state there shall be a police chief, fire department. If those are considered to be essential, then you may want to delineate if you want to have those positions. Everything else would move into the code of ordinances and just establish the constitutional standards. What we'd have to do in the charter is we'd have to have if we're moving a lot of things out, and I have a feeling that there's a lot of extraneous language in the charter, but there's not a lot of departments in the charter through my recollection. And so we're going to have to look at this thing. I'm going to have to sit down with your corp counsel on a couple of days during the winter at some point and go through the document to see whether he agrees with my theory that a lot of this stuff will have to come out or may have to go to the back of the document. But if we're moving a department out of the charter and into the code of ordinances, there should be a temporary sunset chapter in the charter to make sure we don't eliminate something until we do have an ordinance in place. So what I've done in communities where we've done these movements is we've moved the current charter section into a different chapter article and leave it in place until the council adopts the ordinance. And it requires the corporation council to make an opinion that the ordinance in effect serves as the replacement for that section, because you don't want to pass half an ordinance and then get rid of a whole department. You want to make sure that it's dealt with comprehensively. So those would be my examples. I'd have to look at the boards and commissions. I would look at those lists and see which of those would move to the code of ordinances. You have these ancient powers for the mayor and for the council. The mayor's, I know, joked about his authority with regard to houses of ill repute and ability to go in there without going to federal courts for any kind of legal protection. He can just go in there under the state law. Yeah, we probably want to get rid of that, I would think. I mean, I'm assuming that we will go through. So, but I will go through carefully with Mario, the powers of the council and the powers of the mayor. And I want to make sure that when we're conducting this surgery, and I'm recommending pretty substantial surgery,
Yeah.
that we don't get rid of something, even if it sounds ancient, if there's any unique power that the city wants to keep, I would say keep it, even if it sounds ancient, even if it comes from the special act. But I want to go through that with your corporation counsel who works with the charter every day. Carl or Commissioner Dickens, my view on it is it would be too extensive a list, but you will see it as we go through it. I think that the budget process should be in your charter. I think you should move the capital budget ordinance into the charter so that your budget process is governed completely by charter. Not all the little details. There may be things you can create by ordinance, but the timing and the contents that you want to have in your budget, those kinds of things, and the dynamics between the three players in that process, the legislative body, the BET and the BET and the mayor.
Okay.
Anyone
Steve,
else?
thank you. This is Angela Wasuna.
Hi.
Thank you, Steve. I mean, this is helpful as always. The timelines are aggressive. I agree. And I think we'll have to really move quickly. So should we revisit sort of the practical review? Like how are we going to be most efficient in terms of receiving the drafts, redlining, making sure we're aligned, taking into account public comments? I'm just a little bit concerned about how we as a collective are going to be able to do that in the most efficient way.
Yeah, it's going to be up to me to get these things in. I talked to the chair about this the other day. She and I need to communicate and make sure, one, we get agendas out earlier than we're getting them out, and that we get the background and content materials to you in plenty of time before you have to act. So my hope is that we will get this stuff out at least before the end of the week prior to your Wednesday meeting, so you
Okay.
have the opportunity to see those drafts. I don't want to give you a draft for the first time. You will never get anything
Mhm.
from me the night of your meeting for
Right.
you to act on something. But for you to really look at it, you shouldn't have to wait till the night of your meeting either. So I'm going to do my best, depending on how everything works, to get everything to you, let's say by the Thursday, or at the latest the Friday
Yeah.
before your Wednesday meeting. So you have a weekend to
Mhm.
look at the content.
Mhm.
So that would be my objective.
And then we'd have enough time, Patsy, to deliberate as a commission
Yes,
on each of
yeah.
those changes.
Yeah,
Okay.
that is one of my concerns, that we start to figure out how we're really gonna work together. We've been getting a lot of instructions and inputs, but we're not hands-on at this point, and I think we're all anxious to get started with that. And there's some simple things that we've talked about in the past that we know we want to cleanse the current charter of things that are absolutely passé. There's probably 3 or 4 pages of bonding issues that have been long settled, that can just be crossed out and cleaned up. And so we take a ½ inch of paper out of it. And and we talked about the gender neutrality language throughout. And if we head in that direction, so that when council is rewriting, that is sort of automatic as we go through, those kind of things, that I think that will get us a feeling that we're digging in, and along with the outline, Steve, that you've already presented for us. The process then, we get these things a few days before, we look them over, and then our next meeting, is it your intention that we go through each piece line by line, basically, and have discussion on each paragraph that's substantive?
Yeah, the debate will be up to you. I don't dictate. I'll give you drafts, how you debate it is really up to you, whether you do it line by line. I'll certainly explain everything I've done in the document to you. But what you do is really up to the body. And there's be some things that are so self-evident, you're not going to need to do that. But I really do recommend that everybody read everything I provide them, so that we are doing this in an informed fashion. And because it is, I've never tackled a complete rewrite as we are trying to do here. This is a big deal. Because normally I would say, we'll do this, and then we'll move into that, and then we'll move into the next thing. And we may or may not get to the thing after that. But in this case, if we start rewriting it, we can't have a partial new charter and a remaining old charter. Do you see my point? And that's why this is a very different process. So this is a different animal than almost anything I've worked on. I almost wish we had a year more to do this starting up front, but the fact is it's a different animal, but the debate is yours. And the major thing I want to be concerned about is that we don't pull so much out that is problematic to you've had a corporation counsel for God, he's been over a decade. Mayor, am I right? Mario's been here. So you have a very experienced corporation counsel. When I have an experienced corporation counsel, I want to make sure I'm getting his full advice and thoughts on this. So yes, you would have full debates. And so when I say you have to act on it on a certain date, that's a proposal. You act on it when you feel you need to act on it. And you come back to me and say, Steve, I don't think you addressed that. Or Steve, I know you didn't want to go to the third rail, but we want to go to the third rail. And I would say, then talk to the mayor and Tom about that. But the point of fact is, ultimately, it's going to be up to you. That's why I left a lot of latitude in the month of really April and May, to allow for us to push out that much further. As I say, my biggest hope is that with the boards and commission departments, that we will, since we're going to be excising a lot of stuff, unless people have objections, it won't be a huge, it's a big process, but it won't be a huge drafting process. If I don't have 25 commissions or 25 departments, then it's really a function of how the processes are set up to get from here to there. And one other thing I want to point out to the commission, in the Hartford charter that was passed last week and the Hamden charter that was passed last week and the New Haven charter that I did 10 years ago, I have a fairly robust set of language that deals with the selection process and how you work to diversify boards and commissions and communities. The kind of outreach that is involved there, requirements for diversity, for geographic diversity, racial diversity, all different forms of diversity. So there's a lot of interesting language that that has been adopted by some of my communities throughout the state that I think would be very useful for Norwalk as well. So
getting back to the total structure, it seems a pretty obvious consensus that it's cleansing and reorganizing so that we can read it, number one. And the way we're approaching it, we're sort of taking categories and not the whole charter. So is there a way that we can do that cleansing piece early and get it over with? And then we have a better idea how much time we have to discuss any one particular idea that you want to present and just have us discuss in full. I'm not sure what I'm saying.
I'm not sure what you're asking.
Well, you have,
Because the cleansing is going to go chapter by chapter.
yeah.
Yeah.
You have reorganized the chapters, the content into
Yeah.
new chapters.
Yes.
And so is there a way within that reorganization that you can eliminate a lot of the extraneous language?
Oh, yeah. That's what I'm proposing. I'm proposing
But I
that.
mean, in the entirety first, rather than section by section.
Oh,
your intent is doing it section by section, chart.
I mean, if you want to
article by
wait 2 months, I mean, it would take me a couple of months the reason I'm doing it section by section is it would take me a couple of months to do the whole revision and show you what I pulled out. That's why I've recommended that we do it incrementally, because that keeps the commission involved in it. That I'm working at your pleasure to try to make sure that we end up with a document that works. And I think the best way to do it is chapter by chapter. Because I will show you when I bring in chapters 1 through 3, I will show you what I took out of those chapters.
Okay.
That'll be easy to see. When we work on the budget section, the budget section, ironically, may be one of the few sections where we don't eliminate a lot of the language, because it's not a lot of language to begin with. It's actually, when you pull it all out and you organize it the way it's organized now, it's other than plain language and gender neutrality and some of the issues you just talked about, Madam Chair, it tells a story. The story is pretty clear on how you start it, how you end it. It's the other sections that will be big. So yeah, I'll be doing that, and I will I'll show you where the where the debris is and what it looks like as we go through it. That's the idea of approaching it that way. And as you see it stripped down, all of you, including the mayor, including Tom and the other members of the council, may look at things and say, aha, no, what about this? I thought this was addressed in the charter, and maybe we should address it in the charter. So I can't tell you what those things are going to be. I'm just going to try to strip it down, leave the terms of office exactly the way they are, the composition of the council the way it is, the composition of the BET, and the BET will be in the charter. I'm not going to recommend that we move the BET out of the charter. So something like the BET will be in the charter. And I'm not, unless somebody gives me instructions, and I've seen nothing from the public that tells me this should be changed or that should be changed, you will see the BET in the charter. I'll look at extraneous language. Instead of having appointment provisions for every board and commission that remains in the charter, there'll be a standard language on how appointments are made. So you don't repeat it 5 times, 12 times, 15 times in the charter. So I don't see any way to do it comprehensively in short order. That's why I've recommended the incremental approach.
Okay. Mr. Livingston, do you have any comments on now that?
No, I mean, I think what Steve laid out makes perfect sense. I don't think he can do more than, I mean,
An article?
I think you need to do it piece by piece, like he says.
Okay. Any other commissioner have any ideas, questions? Interests?
I will talk to Mario about a subsequent meeting. I know he's very busy. It's I used to be a corp counsel, so I get it. So I'll talk to him and see whether he can come to the next meeting, or we'll organize another meeting with him.
And I think then if there aren't any other questions.
Actually,
anybody
I do
wants to-
have a
oh,
question.
yes, good.
What about what's underneath the actual charter?
All of the references.
The references, editor's notes and recodifications of current articles. What happens with that?
Oh, I put those in. So they're gonna, I want to make sure that whatever we do is annotated. And so if sections are going to be eliminated, let's say that we're removing the provisions in the mayor's office regarding the issue I raised before without raising it again, then there'll be a reference in the annotations that the provisions regarding the mayor's authority to enter premises without a warrant were repealed by the 2023 Charter Revision Commission. So that will be there. You have a lot of good notes in it. I just try to create it when I did the revision in a systematic way, so that when I start moving things around, which I did already, I mean, that's why I put them in there. So I want to make sure we can go back and look at the puzzle pieces and figure out where things came from. One thing we're not going to be able to do and I just came through a community where this was not understood. I think it was not understood because they didn't want to understand it, is when you do a massive restructuring, and I've done those before, Hartford, Waterbury, most of my charters have been restructuring, and you're moving things around. It's hard to do a red line with that kind of document. So we will probably not have the benefit of a red line, but I think anybody, I don't know what the charter is going to look like, but I guarantee it's going to look very different than this charter. Anyone looking at it will understand why there can't be a red line. And that's why I want to keep the annotations alive and make sure that if somebody really, a member of the public really wants to go back and try to do it, they can look at the history and look at where the section came from and how it evolved or devolved.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Good question.
Yeah, anybody else?
Just
Carl?
a quick one for Steve. You mentioned a couple of communities that have just passed new charters. Is it possible for us to take a look at those?
Oh, absolutely. I'll send them over. I'll send you the one that failed in Fairfield. I think it was a great charter. It was a terrific charter. So I'll send you those 3 charters that I worked on. Very proud of them. I'll send you Middletown's. I'll send you the last 3 or 4 charters I've worked on, and feel free to go through them. You will see. Now, I've worked on all of them. I restructured all of them in given times, and you will see similarities, but it's a wonderful way to prove that there's no cookie cutter. So
Right.
you'll see a lot of things that are similar from charter to charter because they have the same author, but you will also see why Middletown is unique, why Hartford is unique, why Fairfield is unique, and why Hamden is unique. There are differences of culture and differences of institutions that have operated in those communities. And I don't try to homogenize charters to make them all look exactly the same way. So I'll be happy. I'll send you all 4 of those charters.
Okay, guys, because what I'm really curious about is
I'll ask Jordan to remind me.
certain issues that maybe cause something to pass versus it failing.
You know, that question came up. Where did it come up? In Stanford. I'm doing Stanford's charter right now, and that came up. And give you an example. I might have mentioned this to you guys as well. Well, I guess when I met with you, the election hadn't occurred. In Hamden, they just approved a 4-year term for mayor. And it was not a separate question. I had advised them to do a separate question because that's usually a very controversial issue. They made a judgment call. There was not a lot of outcry from the public about it. But even without the outcry, I went to the president of the council and I said to her, we really should think about a second question and pull this out and make it a separate question. There's been no outcry. We'll have to live with it. If it happens, it happens. Well, it didn't. They passed. It passed. And there was no outcry at all. Then I had a community, Fairfield, where we had one, and the question in Hartford, I think I've explained this, in Hamden and Hartford were, will you support the charter that was approved by the Charter Commission and approved by the council? Period. Now, we had an explanatory text that got into all the details. We had a lot of stuff online that people could look at, but that was the question. That was it. It didn't tell you the 25 or 30 different things that were changed, minor things, but some big stuff in the budget. But if you read those other documents, you would see that those things occurred. If you saw the red line that was published, you would see that those things occurred. In Fairfield, and there was no clamor, and both those charters were approved overwhelmingly. Nothing really controversial. The most controversial thing, as I said, was the 4-year term that was approved for mayor in Hamden, but it was approved prospectively, not for the 2023 cycle, but for the 2025 cycle. In Fairfield, we had an omnibus question that has multiple parts, but you could only vote on up or down on the whole thing. But the idea of the omnibus question was to say, these are the 10 major things that were done in the document, yay or nay. If you want to know the rest of them, go look at the red line, go look at the explanatory text, etc. In Fairfield, that became fatal. There was nothing controversial, nothing, no 4-year term, no change of the structure of government. It was just a very political judgment that they didn't want the first select person, the chief executive, to have a victory. and they beat the charter. And they said it wasn't transparent. There should have been 20 questions or 12 questions or 6 questions. But I guarantee you, based on the patterns that we saw during the process, which were in the most political charter revision I've ever done, that if we did 4 questions, they would have wanted 6. If we did 6, they would have wanted 10. And it went down. There was nothing in there. The big issues for the opposition were that we took the engineering requirement away from the public works director. And that was somehow a power grab by the chief executive. I'm sure the mayor has other ways to make power grabs other than changing the qualifications of an office. One of the other things was we eliminated 7 elected constables and created 4 appointed constables, another power grab issue. So it was really, Commissioner Dickens, a very, very political process. And I'd never seen anything like it in all the years I did charters. Now, as Tyler might be, I don't know, I think Tyler was working for Bridgeport when we did the charter there 10 years ago. And we had, the mayor made a judgment call. He wanted to have mayoral control over the Board of Ed. He had to get state legislation to allow it, and we took advantage of it. And he proposed a majority appointed by the mayor, minority elected. It became a fatal issue. And while we separated the issue, it's an example of where we separated the issue. It was such an overwhelming issue that everything died. It died by less than the mayoral power issue on the Board of Ed. In Berlin, I did a little charter in Berlin. It was a 6-week charter process. They wanted to get 3 or 4 things done, but they had one issue that killed it. And you know what that issue is? If you live in Berlin, Connecticut, and you are sick, you're entitled under their charter to VNA, Visiting Nurses of America service, which the town pays for. It's kind of like socialism in Connecticut. It's really very interesting. And the town has grown. There was a time where they could sustain it, but the town has grown and they're losing millions and millions of dollars a year on it. And they wanted to move it out of the charter to see if they could at least modify it by ordinance or do whatever they want. Dead. That's understood. That killed the whole thing. All 4 questions went down because of the VNA situation. So you don't know. You just don't know, Commissioner Dickens, what's going to make something float and what's going to make something sink.
Yeah, so just one other quick question on the 4-year term for the mayor in Hamden was that positioned as a term limit, or how did they position that?
Well, there's no term. You can't do term limits in Connecticut, so there's no term limit at all.
Right.
But the way they did it, and the way I've recommended it in other communities, is to have a 4-year term for mayor and keep the 2-year term for council. And that gives the council the role of being the offset in the by-election, so that if you have a mayor who's gone off the deep end, the voters can put a check on the mayor by electing a council that may be a more difficult council, or a council that doesn't come in on a slate with the mayor. And so that's what Hamden did.
Okay. I don't mean to take up all your time, but
Well, listen, that's why we're here.
That's why we're here.
Learn and gain that experience. Anyone else? I think it would be good if we did discuss the meeting on December 21st. That's where the commissioners feel, I'm anxious for us to really dig in and get started here. So I'm concerned about pushing that into January. So could we just get a individual input of what works for you personally and what doesn't?
I'm fine with the 21st staying the way it is, so.
I'm fine too.
I think I'm fine with the 2. Let's
Okay,
check the
Tyler?
calendar.
I'm fine with it. Patsy, that would be no problem for me. I'm around and happy to meet then.
And Angela?
I'm around, happy to also meet.
And I am too, so I think it's, do you think it's necessary to take a vote on that or not?
I I don't think so if it's already scheduled.
Okay, but that's good so that we can really plan our own personal time rather than
Right.
changing it in another 2 weeks or whatever.
Good.
Steve, is that good for you?
I'm the one who proposed it.
Oh,
I
okay.
put
Staying
that
with
burden,
it.
I put that burden on my shoulders and now I've got it. So that I'll be happy to do it.
Okay, so is there anything else that anybody wants to bring up?
I'm still concerned how many people in town are being informed about all this. And I'm not sure what the solution is to that. I mean, we don't really have a big media base here to keep beating it out. I don't know whether, whether we need to go to some of the district meetings of both parties and have conversation or Tom, I don't know what you think about this. If you have your council members talk to your constituents or try to get the word out. I'm just concerned that, all this work will be done and of course, you mentioned the politic word in these other towns, which of course we don't have any here. But
Yes,
Yeah,
Well,
I
yeah,
agree
Carl-
with what you're saying.
yeah,
Perhaps we can, and I know that it's not gonna do a whole heck of a lot, but perhaps we can get a little blurb in the hour every time you're gonna have a meeting so that people can know. We can keep it on the city website. Whatever, we've got a Facebook page, we'll put it on a Facebook page.
Nancy on.
Yeah,
And perhaps, I don't know if you can have a website or a page for the Charter Revision Commission might be a good idea.
yeah.
right.
that's-
So if I could just add to that, because I've spoken with Leisha and we're talking to Michelle about getting as the mayor says, a page on the city website.
Yeah.
I have also reached out to Abigail Brown at the hour to try and get as much attention as we can.
how about an interview with you or somebody?
I've offered that actually. And I think realistically, we're not going to get a lot of attention right now. Partly it's the commission's just getting started. Partly it's the time of year. I think as we get going, there'll be more interest in it. But Carl, you're absolutely right. We've got to get people and keep people engaged, get them coming to meetings. And it's something we've recognized on the council, and I know with the mayor's office as well, that we have to do this.
Yeah, and because there's so many different interpretations out there. I
Yeah.
mean, like you mentioned about the mayor heading up the school board. That's even raised its head here in this town about that he hasn't got anything else to do than run the school board.
Yeah.
So I mean, there's just a lot of stuff I think we need to get clear. And I think it's incumbent upon the people in this community that are part of different parties to have that conversation amongst themselves to try and clear up as much ambiguity as they can. I mean, I don't see this as a political situation where one side or the other. I see this as something that is going to help move the town forward. And also get rid of all the rumors that we have in this town amongst different people that, I hear all the time. Well, I've lived here for my whole life, so I know everything that's in there. Really? Yeah. Anyway, that's Carl's feeling.
Carl, yeah, this is Tyler, Madam Chair, if it's okay. I've spent the last 12 years of my career writing community plans and desperately trying to get the public in various communities to participate and comment on them, often to no avail. So I definitely am sensitive to that and agree with you. And I know I have I get emails from a couple different council members that have all referenced charter in it, and updates they send out to their districts and their constituents. I know we've discussed it at our district DTC meetings, so I think there are ways to get out there. I would definitely encourage council members to, however they are communicating with people in their district to keep pushing it. And I do think that having it come up at the district level for the DTC and the RTC meetings is another way that I think would be helpful. I mean, I've seen it also on Facebook and a couple other places. So, I think it's out there. We just have to, hope that people are paying attention. And I do like the idea too, if we're going to kind of bite this off piece by piece, which I wholeheartedly agree with, would be maybe kind of intermittent status updates, right? So if we do the first 3 articles, or if we do the first 3 articles plus 5, something like that, maybe post something on the city website showing what we've done to give people an idea of, this is what it was, these are the changes we've made, and, see if you have any outcry or issues or so forth, based on that smaller piece, so that we could adjust midstream if need be.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know what everybody thinks about this, but maybe at one of the meetings, hopefully sooner than later, maybe we send a personal invitation to each of the district chairs for each party and invite them to come to the meeting. They can sit in on this and get educated.
And Carl, I mean, if I might, and I don't know how the commission feels about that, and if we're, maybe we can circulate the calendar that you guys have just agreed to, sort of tentative calendar for this, so people have a sense of what's coming. Now, I understand it's going to be subject to change, but maybe that's helpful just to give people a framework to think about. I'll just throw it out for your consideration.
I think that's probably a good idea.
Yep.
The more we get people involved in my, again, personal opinion, the better. Sorry.
Steve, would, if we do follow along with something like this and we post the section that we're going to be, the next section coming up, would it be wise to have some of the suggestions that we are going to discuss on the website prior to the meeting, or a resume of the discussion after
Well,
critique? Yeah.
The comment grid that I sent out to you all, that you have,
Right.
should be on, if we have a website, should be posted on a website. There should definitely be a link to it, so members of the public see that not only do we have an agenda, but that the public who send in ideas will be referenced on that agenda, and they will see their names associated with the proposals that they have. So I would say that when we, I don't know if it would be at the next meeting or the meeting after that, we would, we could probably post, we should post chapter 10. Is it chapter 10? The finance stuff should be posted and say, this is what
We're going to review.
the local officials are going to be talking about at the next meeting. So we should definitely pull that out and post that. I would think that's a great idea.
And I was thinking perhaps every so often a letter from me or from us to the editorial page of the local paper. That just will hit a few people.
Yeah, no, I agree.
And
But I think Commissioner Dickens is absolutely right that there should be an active attempt to make sure that political players in the community, in both parties, or however many parties you have, really have a sense of where we're going. As Commissioner Fairborn said, it's really up to them to decide how involved they're going to be. You can do all the outreach in the world, but if there's nothing that's really exciting anybody, then we'll see how many people show up. But I think you have to go through all the, take all the actions to get as much involvement from people as possible.
Yeah, I just don't want to see us go down the road that we tend to do a lot where a lot of work goes on behind the scenes. People don't say anything. And then when it comes time to go to a vote, they blow stuff out there that's totally erroneous.
I agree. And my experience in Fairfield confirms that. So I really think you just bring everybody in, make sure everybody's being talked to. You have a really good, strong, nonpartisan body here that I'm looking at of commissioners. And I think that everybody should use their good graces and their good offices to make sure they're communicating with the people that they know in the community. So there are no surprises anywhere.
Right.
So.
Okay, is there anything else anyone would like to bring up? All right, so a motion to adjourn and wish everybody a healthy and wonderful Thanksgiving holiday.
Well, that's next week, isn't it?
That is shocking. So a motion to adjourn, please. Carl, Angela?
Yeah.
Carl seconds.
Move the motion to
Favor?
adjourn. Yep.
We
Good
are
night.
adjourned.
Good night. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Yo.
7:30, is it on the nose?
7:30
7:30 on the nose.
Wow,
on the nose.
Good.
Take-
good-
Take care, everybody.
thank you.